Good morning and welcome to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can follow us at 855-752-4842. That's 855-752-4842. Good morning to you, Calvin.
How are you this morning, Earl?
Well, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat.
Yeah, it sounded like they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory last night.
Man, it was, you know, it for all the world. The Brewers have been in the playoffs. People may not notice the last 5 or 6 years. So, I mean, they're right there. And you just wonder, and you really thought last night was going to be the opportunity, man. They had a rookie pitcher. He pitched 5 innings. He only gave up 2 hits. They go into the bottom of the 8th inning. It's nothing to nothing. The Brewers hit 2 solo home runs back to back. And so you figure, man, this is it. They're bringing in Devin Williams, once the best relief pitcher in the major leagues 2 years in a row. Granted, just coming off of surgery that he had earlier this summer, and so he didn't play much. He came back. I think he's probably been back maybe about a month. So it's just what you wanted, Calvin. Your closer, arguably one of the best relief pitchers in the entire league. You're up 2-0. You're at home. The people are going crazy. And then the unthinkable happened, Calvin.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that's baseball. Everything can change with one swing of the bat.
Do you think the Brewer fans want to hear that?
Well, no, definitely not.
But you are right. It is baseball. But the guy who ever came up with that axiom, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, man, that's what took place last night, man. And that's that's a hard pill to swallow, Calvin. Um, the Brewers firmly in first place. Man, for the better half of the year, second half of the year, you know, and great young team. And you're figuring this is it. And, man, and that quickly, it's over. And,
Yeah,
go ahead, Calvin.
yeah, and baseball's, I don't know, it's so much about peaking at the right time, and it definitely feel like the Brewers peaked in like July, and they were kind of not doing so well the past
Yeah,
3 weeks or so.
yeah, uh, it without question, what you say is true, and I know. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it because I know that there are Brewer fans, especially Luke, man, right?
Yeah, and Greg.
Hey, Greg too. So Luke was there last night, and I know, man, he had to be just probably in shock this morning.
Yeah, definitely a tough pill to swallow. I mean, I'm not a huge Brewer fan, but I can relate it to being a Bucks fan, and it
I
definitely
know.
is a bummer when your season ends.
Hey, Brendan, I can tell you've been around a while, man. That was the opening of the wide world of sports, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. But no game better portrayed that than what transpired with the Brewers last night. But let's got a lot to talk about today. We're going to be joined by Dan Schaefer this morning, and we got a lot to talk about with him. But I want to begin with this, and I don't know how you can't talk about this. You know, Kamala Harris is being scorned and ridiculed by the Republican Party because they say she only offered $750 to the victims of the Helena's hurricane. And so Donald Trump Jr., amongst a high level or high profile Republicans, have been criticizing Vice President Kamala Harris following her visit to see Hurricane Helena's damage in Georgia, claiming she only offered those affected $750. Now, we're going to break this down because if you just go by what they say, you would say, how in the world is it possible that the wealthiest nation on earth can only offer $750 to people who've lost everything? And if you listen to Republicans and Donald Trump and others lying like they do, then you would say, man, that's it. That's all she offered. But Calvin, I don't think that a vice president can offer anything. She's, she doesn't make the call on how much money is going to be allocated in these tough situations. That's generally handled by uh, Alejandro Mayorkas, who is a guy who's kind of over those kinds of things. Joe Biden and a whole group of people who make that call, Calvin.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's just a misunderstanding of how the government works and how FEMA works. From my understanding, is $750 per person affected. The way the law is written, that's the maximum amount they can offer without congressional approval. So their hands are kind of tied unless Congress does something about
So the
it.
$750 that she was talking about was immediate dollars to help people buy food and water. And what do people need right away after, Calvin, after this kind of a disaster? The first thing they need is food and water, clean water and food, and yes, shelter. And so FEMA is down there attempting to, provide shelter. But I'm listening to conservative radio, and they're saying that the reason that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are not helping these people are because a lot of them are MAGAs. Calvin, a lot of them live in North Carolina, South Carolina, and they live in the hills. And so they're hard to reach. And those roads have been wiped out. And so to say that the reason that they're not helping them, everything's got to be politics with these people. The reason they're not helping them is because they're MAGAs. And so if you want to believe that, fine. But I got a lot of information that I'm going to share with you that will push back against all of that. Sometimes I think when these people say and do the things they do, they think that there aren't people like me and others who can dig into what's truth and what's a lie. And so what these people are talking about and why this $750, is allocated, if you thought that was all that the government was providing, then you would have every right to be outraged. But that's not the case. The $750 is for right this moment. People who have nothing. It gives them an opportunity to go and get something to eat, to get water, as FEMA is working feverishly to try to house these people. Now, I don't know what you expect or what people think. I remember Hurricane Katrina. Maybe some of you don't. And so to say that they haven't been there and they haven't done all of this and they were late getting to the game is not true. They've attempted to move heaven and earth. That's what our government does. They don't do things based on whether somebody is a MAGA or whether somebody is, a northern person or a southern person. It's not true. And so just because Donald Trump Jr. and other urchins like him are willing to lie, and Donald Trump himself lying and misleading people during a crisis, what more do you expect from, these people? Now, I'm going to dismantle these lies in the next, 20 minutes or so. And I wonder what people will say then, because how soon we forget. But man, thank God for Google. Thank God for computers. Because before it'd be hard to try to find that information. Right now, it's at your fingertips. So I'm going to dismantle the lies that are being spread by those who support Donald Trump and himself at a time that they would take advantage of people who are at the lowest ebb. Says a lot about who they are. 855-752-4842 is the number. That's Friday, and so Sandy Williams is out of town this week, so we're going to do it ourselves. You can join us at 855-752-4842. You're tuned into the Earl Ingram Show. All right, welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. That's 855-752-4842. So you're going to be hearing nonstop from conservatives that Vice President Kamala Harris only offered $750 to these families that have been impacted and affected by Hurricane Helena. And and did she offer $750? Yes, she did. And so that's because that's what they needed to do and will do to just get people what they need at that moment. And that's food and water, the bare necessities of life. When everything you have is wiped away, you can't think right away. You're not going to solve this immediately. What is the number one need of the people at that time? And so that's why. Now, this is according to not Earl Ingram, but Alejandro Mayorkas, Homeland Security Secretary. Here's what he had to say. He warned the Federal Emergency Management Agency does not have enough funding to cover the rest of the hurricane season. The big picture, Hurricane Helena carved a path of destruction through 6 southeastern states, leaving unprecedented devastation, totaling tens of billions of dollars across communities, several of which officials said Thursday will need a full rebuild. At least 215 people were killed due to the storm, which brought catastrophic flooding to coastal and inland towns, according to the Associated Press. The Federal Relief Agency is extending aid in the form of food, water, generators, and monetary assistance, among other resources. So far, officials said Thursday FEMA has provided over $20 million in individual assistance. What he's saying, we are meeting the immediate needs with the money that we have, Mayorkas told reporters on Wednesday, per multiple reports. He continued, we are expecting another hurricane hitting. We do not have the funds. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season. Now, why does FEMA not have the funds? 855-752-4842. I know why they don't have the funds. I'm wondering if you know. 855-752-4842. If you listen to Republicans, they'll tell you it is because they've used the money on immigrants who are here illegally. And that the reason that the FEMA funds aren't there is because they don't have them because they gave all of those funds to illegal immigrants. Now, here's what I want you to understand. And again, especially those who are on the right side, or excuse me, I said before I was going to stop calling people, the Republicans, right on the right side of things. They're certainly on the wrong side of things. But here's a reminder. I remember last year when the budget debate was going on. Don't take my word for it, look it up. And the Republican Party was opposed to the FEMA dollars. The government that the government was requesting. It was Republicans who were opposed to that. You know, they personally voted against the increase in FEMA dollars. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. It's there. They chose to turn down additional FEMA dollars saying, you know, they couldn't afford it. We couldn't afford it. Republicans. Well, now those same Republicans are here to lie to you. Look, I'm going to give you, you know, where you can go to corroborate what I'm saying. So when you see them lying today and tomorrow and the next day, reporters should push back on them and say, hey, you guys are the ones who cut the FEMA budget in 2023. That's true. And yet they're going to continue to lie and lead people to believe that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are the ones who refuse to give these dollars to the American people who are struggling. I've also read where they're saying, well, they gave all this money to Ukraine, and yet they won't give it to the citizens. Man, 855-752-4842. We're going to have at it. You're tuned into the Earl Ingram Show. All right, welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. That's 855-752-4842. So as you watch, over the next few days and weeks, Republicans lying, the president, former president of the United States lying, Republican congressmen and senators lying, Republican talk show hosts lying about the response to Hurricane Helena. You need to know the truth and the facts. And these are some of the facts. And then I'll go to the phone lines. So, every single Florida House Republican voted against disaster relief funding. Let me repeat that. Every single Florida House Republican voted against disaster relief funding. That's a level of callous indifference and political opportunism that boggles the mind, one Florida Democrat said. Just days after Category 4 Hurricane Ian devastated Florida, killing at least 88 people and leveling and flooding thousands of buildings, nearly every Florida Republican in the U.S. Congress voted against a bill containing billions in funding for disaster relief that officials could have accessed to begin recovery after the storm. Last week, Congress passed a stopgap government bill, and this is in 2023, that contained $18.8 billion in federal emergency management funds, FEMA funds, to account for climate crisis-fueled worsening natural disasters that Florida officials could use to speed recovery from Ian, according to the Daily Beast. The bill provided FEMA with a year's worth of disaster funds rather than just the next few months' worth. Now, let me tell you, because there's so much more of this information that's out there that we're going to be going through. Let me go to the phone lines. Let's go to Heather from Milwaukee. Good morning to you, Heather. Thank you very much for the call. You say what?
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it. And I want to start off by saying I've been a long-time Democrat. I have campaigned. I have fundraised for Democratic candidates, walk door to door, get out the vote and all this. But I will not be this time. And I want to share why. And I want to share why also that I want to bring to your listeners' attention that on August 13th, 2024, that was the start of just approaching the hurricane season. You mentioned that FEMA says they don't have any funds for the rest of the season. On August 13th, 2024, the Department of State announced that the U.S. had approved a $20 billion, that's with a B as in boy, weapons package aid sale to Israel, which included fighter jets and advanced air-to-air missiles. These weapons are being used to commit a genocide in Gaza, and they're now bombing Gaza, Lebanon, Yemen, and Syria with our U.S. tax dollars. That's $20 billion that could have been gone to our communities here to provide food and water, whereas what we're doing is there's all the money in the world for weapons and to kill innocent civilians all over the world using our tax dollars. And when we need the money, oh, I'm sorry, there's no money to be had. I don't know what happened to it. We know what happened to it because at the start of the season, we were gifting $20 billion to a foreign government to commit a genocide in our U.S. tax dollars' name.
Hey, Heather, I can feel the pain in your voice. What I will say to you is, this is not just something Democrats have done. Our nation has done that from its inception. And so, you can say that the Democrats have done this, but Republicans and Democrats both agree when it comes to funding Israel. And so by not voting Democrat in this instance, you then you say that Donald Trump is the person that you think should become president of the United States. You think Donald Trump is going to do something different? I understand your pain. I agree with you. I don't like what is happening in the Middle East. Uh, but these things are done unilaterally, and both Democrats and Republicans both agree. They don't agree on much of anything, but when it comes to this and when it comes to war, for the most in most cases, they agree on it. So I would ask you that, you know, with the emotion that you're feeling, because I agree with you, when man's inhumanity to man continues to go on, and what is happening in the Middle East and the fact that we turn a blind eye to it is horrific. Okay? I mean, I agree with you across the board on that. But the answer is certainly not voting for Donald Trump if you think Donald Trump is going to do something better. There's so many other aspects of things that Donald Trump and Republicans are going to destroy, um, that, I would ask you to think twice about the decision. But I understand. I truly understand how you feel. Thank you very much for the call. Let's go to Jim from Brookfield. Good morning to you, Jim. You say what?
Good morning, Earl. I say the Republicans currently are taking the mantra, never let a good disaster go to waste. They're taking that to an extreme with the ultimate lies. They're out there now saying that because the administration is giving a heads up, FEMA may be short-funded this year due to the amount of disasters that are occurring. They're forgetting that Congress sets the budget for FEMA, not the administration,
That's
not
correct.
Kamala Harris. That's Congress that does. And they're also forgetting that in this Project 2025, they're saying eliminate FEMA, and we're going to privatize relief. I mean, come on. You imagine what that'd be like if it was privatized? I mean, they're just there for profit. But the Republicans are forgetting that it's Congress who sets the budget for FEMA, that Project 2025 is calling for the elimination of FEMA, and for them to tie it in and to say that we're out of money because Kamala Harris specifically gave all this money to FEMA that should be going to the North Carolina families and whatnot, and, that they gave it to illegal aliens. That's just beyond pale to put that message out there and scare people and say that all the illegal people crossing from the border, they're getting your money, your hard-earned taxpayers' money that FEMA, should be giving to our people, that it's going to these illegal aliens. That's just beyond pale. And that Stephen Miller, who, was Trump's border czar or whatever, he's just the most ruthless person. He wants to cut funding, for FEMA and everything, and to use those scare tactics and to blatantly lie, which you've been mentioning all morning, Earl. I just think that's beyond pale. They're using these poor people, innocent victims of this catastrophe for their political gain, and I think that's just beyond pale.
Hey, Jim, I couldn't have said it better, man. Thank you very much for the call. They're just lying, man. It's not a surprise. They're just flat out lying. Republicans have refused to increase the FEMA budget last year, the year before. And now that there's a shortfall, instead of them being truthful, what do you think they're gonna do? What they do, lie. Just continue to lie. And yet there are some people who are going to believe that. It's one of the reasons why I did some research before I came in today to tell you about why there's a shortfall in FEMA. 18 Republicans in Florida last year voted to cut the FEMA funds. And then the hurricanes hit Florida. And then they started whining and crying and pointing the finger. We've got their names. Let me see. The bill passed despite opposition Floridians in the caucus. 16 Republican House representatives from the state voted against the bill, including the 2 Republicans who represent constituents in Lee County, where much of the hurricane's destruction was felt. In all, 201 Republicans voted against the bill to keep the government funded through December, while only 10 voted yes. That's last year. let's go to Lynn from Oconomowoc. Good morning to you, Lynn. Thank you very much for the call. You say what?
Thank you, Earl. The billions of dollars in weapons that we're sending to Israel, those are actual weapons. They exist. And I'm sure the vendors have already been paid. They're taking those weapons out of our stockpile of weapons. It's not new money. Just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for the call. Let's go to Susan. Good morning to you, Susan. You say what?
Well, good morning. I'm from Milwaukee, and I was a victim of the Deep Tunnel Project, and I had to deal with FEMA 5 times because my basement and house was flooded 5 times. And FEMA, what you do with FEMA is that you have to register with them. They make an appointment, and they come over to your residence or what's left of your residence. And then they don't quote you amount of money or whatever, but based on the damage that is done to your home, they go and make this report. And then what happens weeks later, a check will come through from the government. That's how FEMA works. What Harris is giving is some relief, is giving these people food and water, which they desperately need. And that's where the $750 comes in. We never got that because we had running water, and then our electricity was restored within a number of hours or days. So people have to realize what the Republicans are doing is another form of fear mongering and pointing the finger. The government is working as quickly and as humanely as possible, and the needs of the people are to feed them, house them, and give them fresh water to drink. And people, you gotta stop listening to this propaganda and working your way up and saying, I'm not going to vote for this, the Biden administration, because this and that. They're doing the best that they can. And if you look, and I'm glad that you do what I do, is I look it up who voted for what. And the Republican Party voted down increasing FEMA.
Yes.
So they're only
over the last 4 years, they voted against FEMA.
Yes, and that is what is so funny. People wake up.
Hey, Susan, thank you very much for the call. Hang on the phone lines. 855-752-4842 is the number. You just got to look and find out for yourself. You can't accept what these people are saying. They're just lying. Donald Trump is the number one liar, and the rest of them follow suit. 855-752-4842. You're tuned into a Friday edition of the Earl Ingram Show. All right, welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. Right before I go to the phone lines, let me read this quickly. Last week, as Hurricane Helena was on course to ravage Florida's Gulf Coast, Congress passed a government funding bill without critically needed supplemental disaster relief funding. But Rick Scott didn't lift a finger to fight for it. Instead, Scott opposed including supplemental disaster relief funding and left Washington early. Floridians desperately need disaster relief funding to rebuild from Helena, but Rick Scott chose to put politics over people instead of fighting for the disaster relief his constituents would need. Scott skipped town without getting the job done. Nothing he says now can distract Floridians from his failure. The funding omission was made all the more striking by the fact that lawmakers were leaving Washington 2 days ahead of the schedule, in part because of the hurricane. And some members like Rick Scott and Representative Matt Gaetz, both Florida Republicans who have opposed efforts to preemptively appropriate disaster dollars, either voted against the CR or skipped the vote to be in Florida ahead of Helena's fallout. Let's go to the phone lines and Gary from Sussex. Good morning to you, Gary. You say what?
Well, no matter who you point the blame at, and I'm not saying for me or you or whatever, but whoever points the blame, doesn't matter because they go by who is in charge at the time. And since it's the Biden administration and Harris administration, they're going to blame them. My cousin, I talked to her yesterday. She lives in North Carolina, and she got some flooding. It wasn't really bad. I was really happy to hear that she fared right through this thing. And she is a strong Biden. I mean, on politics, we're just the opposite, But things are going to change in the next week. If people don't get water and they don't get more money than $750, there's going to be a problem.
Hey, Gary,
it's not going to be.
Did you just dismiss everything that I've been talking about for the last 55 minutes?
I've been listening on and off. I mean, Earl, I have a job.
So I'm listening, man. No, I'm not talking. Well, the bottom line, Gary, is you said it doesn't matter who's to blame. They blame the people in office. I just got through explaining that Republicans are the reason that FEMA doesn't have the money that it needs. The last 4 years, they voted no to increases for FEMA. It does matter.
Does it matter whether money has been taken out of FEMA to give to illegal aliens for housing and phones and all that?
Well, see, Gary, that's the lies that are being told right now. And so that's why you didn't get to hear it, because like you were working, that's fine. But I pointed out where Republicans have not voted yes to raising the appropriations for FEMA over the last 4 years. Republicans.
I understand. And that's what I started out. I said, it doesn't matter who you're blaming. There's a problem right now. And it's going to be a problem for many, many years. So if Trump gets in, there's going to be a problem. And they're going to blame him while he's in office. If Harris gets in there, it's going to be the same thing. There is an absolute problem, and you can blame anybody or push the blame on Trump or you can blame it on the Republicans or the Democrats. There's a problem, and it's going to be with us for a very,
hey, Gary, the Republicans are blaming Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. Okay? Okay, so I push back on that with facts that Republicans have chosen not to fund FEMA. As a matter of fact, Project 2025 wants to privatize FEMA. So there is a difference, man. It's not one and the same.
Knowing that we're in a hurricane season right now, for the Republicans to go out there and say, we don't want to give much more money to FEMA. We want to put it other places, maybe to building more ships or more defense. I don't know. All I know
I just read it, Gary.
they're going to keep, right, I know that, what you read. But I'm going to say that America is going to blame the person who's in charge, and whoever is in charge who wins the election, they're going to be blamed, whether it's Trump or Biden.
Hey, Gary, not all of America agrees with you. You can't speak for America. You can only speak for yourself and a certain segment of the population that agree with you. So, don't agree with you on that. 855-752-4842 is the number. It's Friday. And I'm going to be joined by Dan Schaefer. Hang on the phone lines. We'll come to you on the other side. All right, welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. That's 855-752-4842. And I want to welcome Mr. Dan Schaefer to our program this morning. He is with Recombobulation Area, and he's been new to civic media now for, I don't know, what, 4 or 5 months?
Only just a little over a month now.
Oh,
Time is a flat circle here, Earl. It's so much happening in such a little time. I started the week of the DNC, and it just feels like there's been 4 months of things happening in that time, doesn't it?
well, tell us a little bit about Dan Schaefer before we've got phone lines lit up. So we'll tell us a little bit about you before we get to those phone lines. Those calls.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So yeah, like you said, I just joined Civic Media as the political editor about a little over a month ago, and joined as also I founded a weekly opinion column and online publication called The Recombobulation Area. Founded that a few years ago while I was a stay-at-home dad. I've also been a journalist in and around Milwaukee for the better part of the last 15 years at places like Milwaukee Magazine, Milwaukee Business Journal, and elsewhere. Yeah, I've been writing this opinion column at the Recombobulation Area for almost 5 years now. Happy to have it now as part of Civic Media. So yeah, also, just a lifelong Wisconsinite. Grew up in Waukesha County, went to college at UW Oshkosh. And so I've got a lot of opinions on this wonderful state of ours.
So let me tell you what we've been talking about. We've been talking about the fact that the conversation is that Kamala Harris, and they mentioned Kamala Harris as if she unilaterally has the power to give out FEMA dollars. She only gave out $750 to people who need it the most, and so Republicans are blaming this on her. And so I've been pointing out that Republicans have, over the last 4 years, underfunded FEMA. Project 2025 is looking to privatize FEMA. And so the fact that, you can, and even this past week, Republicans, including Rick Scott and others in Florida, chose not to hang around and make a decision to help those people in their own hometowns. They were too busy. They got out before the votes were cast. So we've got people on the phone line who've been weighing in. You're certainly welcome, Dan, to weigh in along with them and to respond. So let's go to Tom from LA. He's been hanging on the longest. Tom, good morning to you. You say what?
Good morning, Earl. First off, these people need to understand that all spending bills go in one place, and that's the House of Representatives. We do not have the House of Representatives now. That is the Republican Party. Most people don't know that the House of Representatives is where spending bills actually occur. Yes, we have the Senate, but we have the House and the Senate, which make up Congress. I think what they're really, really hoping is that the American people are so stupid that they think there's only one branch of government, and that's the president. And I think these Trumpers are getting people ready for one branch of government. We have 3 branches of government, and we better start realizing that. Also, when it comes to the vice president does not have the power that the president does. So I don't know what they're talking about. And Gary, who's talking about it being Joe Biden's fault, again, it's got to go through Congress. It has to go to the House of Representatives. We have 3 branches of government. They're supposed to be co-equal branches of government. And we better learn our civics, and we better learn it fast, because if we just think that there's one branch of government, Donald Trump will have a blast in terms of going after all the people and saying he's a king. That is not the way the United States is supposed to work. This is between democracy and authoritarian dictatorship.
Hey, Tom,
2025.
thank you very much for, the truth. You want to respond to that, Dan?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and just showing how the the separation of powers is an important one. And I think if you talk about that in the context of the House, that could be an argument that Democrats could be making to try to win back the House right now in some of these key races. There's a few of them, in and around Wisconsin that we'd be watching in this fall's election too. But I think just the larger point that I always tend to notice when Republicans will politicize the response to these disasters is that, so often Republicans will say, hey, why don't we have this type of funding for Americans? Why are we sending it overseas? Why are we doing this and that? Well, so often when these funding bills come up before Republicans, they're the ones voting against it. And so it's like a situation where like, well, we don't want this money going overseas. Okay, Democrats often will say, let's spend some money here. Let's improve healthcare. Let's improve our emergency response. Let's fund these types of government programs. But nope, Republicans always want to cut back on government, less government, and that means less quality and less of less funding in these types of moments when we could otherwise be having a more robust federal response.
All right, let's go to CJ. Good morning to you, CJ. You say what?
Good morning, Earl and Dan. I hope Dan takes my calls when I call him because Earl's one of the few that will. We listened for 3 years to the border czar, VP Harris and Mayorkas, tell us the border was secure. They wonder why FEMA doesn't have any money because they've taken $620 billion and given it for illegal aliens that are here because they changed executive order, allowed them into the country.
Hey, CJ, can you back that up with facts?
Look it up.
No, I
Congressional
don't
Budget
know.
Office says, well, it's easy, Earl. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says it costs $10,000 per year per illegal to have them in this country for our schools, the hospitals, and social. That's the Congressional Budget Office. That's a fact. So if you're wondering where FEMA's money went, you can look right at VP Border Czar Harris, and you can look at President Biden, and you can look at do-nothing Mayorkas.
Hey, CJ, did you hear anything that I said and just read about, Rick Scott and others in the last 4 years, Republicans voting no towards increasing FEMA funds? Do you know about that? Oh, okay, he's gone. You want to respond to any of that?
Well,
Dan?
you ask him one question and he's not able to respond. It's a little bit telling there, isn't it? I mean, there's so much fear mongering and nonsense going on among the Republican Party, tying every last issue back to the border, back to quote unquote illegal immigration. That it's just so overstated in so many senses. And I think you're right to point out that we've had opportunities to better fund these programs, and the people voting against it are so often Republicans.
All right, let's go to Mike from Kenosha. Good morning to you, Mike. You say what?
Thank you. I'm so glad you took my call. They broke two things real quick. Number one is they broke it. Donald Trump vetoed updated immigration bill in 2017. Somehow that escapes today's news, much less the ones that they turned their back on last year. So again, they broke it. What happens when low information people begin to settle in their their low information world? It creates bad attitudes. It creates poor decisions. And when we have a party that's turned into grievance only prevails, GOP, to where all they do is complain. They don't fix anything. There's not a MAGA representative that came in there to build and sustain a good, strong government. Every single one of them had an agenda to tear the government down, to get rid of the administrative state. What else is going to happen when you put anti-government people in a position in government? It's not going to work. It's just, I don't know, elementary. The last thing I want to talk about real quick is, they've been, the right-wingers have been pushing against climate change and denials for years, even though the research clearly shows ExxonMobil being aware of the downside risks in the late 70s, and others. Every decade, there was more information available, most of it concealed out of the public view. And so then here we are, we see these anomalies, what used to be anomalies, happening on a regular basis. We're seeing catastrophic storms like we've never seen before. And then the first thing the grievance-only prevails party does is point fingers instead of getting to work to do the job that they were elected to do. So my final point here is, if you put people that don't believe in making a more perfect union, don't believe in the whole thought and concept of the U.S. Constitution, if they're sworn enemies and they want to shrink the government is so small that you can drown it in the bathtub, what else is going to happen?
Hey, Mike, thank you very much for the call. You want to respond to that, Dan?
Yeah, one of the stories that jumped out to me yesterday as people were kind of talking about, various federal responses to disasters, there was a story out of Politico, reported that former President Donald Trump was, of course, criticizing the Biden administration for its handling of the disaster. But I'm going to quote from the story here. A review of Trump's record by Politico and interviews with two former Trump White House officials show that the former president was flagrantly partisan at times in response to disasters. And he even asked members of his staff what the voting results were in certain precincts in California when there were wildfires, and decided based on that whether to dole out federal funds for the response. And so that's the type of response that we see from Republicans on this. It is nakedly partisan. And, that's just not how the way things should be.
All right, guys, hang on. We'll be coming right to you. My guest is Mr. Dan Schaefer. He is a recombobulation area. And you'll be hearing more and more of him in the coming weeks and months and years. 855-752-4842. You're tuned into a Friday edition of the Earl Ingram Show. Hang on. Be right with you.
knocking at the door. Somebody ringing the bell. Someone's knocking at the door. Somebody's ringing the bell. Do me a favor, open the door and let him in. Ooh, yeah. Someone's knocking at the door. Somebody's ringing the bell. Someone's knocking at the door. Somebody's ringing the bell. Do me a favor, open the door, let them in. Yeah.
All right, welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. That's 855-752-4842. My guest is Mr. Dan Schaefer. He is with Recombobulation Area, and he'll be joining us from time to time. Let's go to David from Mequon. Good morning to you, David. You say what?
Good morning, Earl. Good morning, Mr. Schaefer. Really quickly, in regards with FEMA, I will just say this. If you remember, it seems like we haven't learned from the past at all in regards with disasters whatsoever. And why do I say that? If you go back to George Bush, remember when he said, "Good job, Brownie"? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And I guess I would. Okay, good. So in this situation with FEMA, unfortunately, and Mr. Schaefer said, well, with the funding and what have you, unfortunately, a lot of our money, though, has gone to, with the migrant situation at the southern border, which has strained resources between states and federal. And how do we know this? If you look at the amount of money that before now the current mayor of New York City got indicted, he was requesting billions of additional dollars from the federal government because of all the additional people that are in New York City. Same thing in Chicago, same thing in California. And so when you have this and you have this situation, it does have an impact. We see what's happening right now. There's just not enough manpower to actually tackle this because there's so many other things that we're dealing with prior to this.
Hey, David,
So-
are you aware of the voting, direction that Republicans have gone in over the last 4 budget cycles when it comes to FEMA?
Yeah, so keep in mind, the Democrats had the House the first 2 years during the Biden administration. So Republicans, even though they may have tried to do whatever, the Democrats still had the purse strings, if you want to call it that. The last couple budget cycles, yes, the Republicans have had control of that. And what they've tried to do is make sure that the allocation for that is really towards for disasters and not, it's being used for other purposes right now, not for disasters. It's being used for the border, which it shouldn't be happening. And if you notice, Biden did reverse by executive order, I think it was September 1, with people claiming asylum into the United States where they would get deported immediately. They wouldn't have any ability of staying here, and we would not have to worry about housing them and feeding them and all that other stuff. And that just recently happened, and you went right back to the old playbook of what was previously in place when Hugh became president.
So David, hang on a second. Dan, you want to respond to any of that?
Yeah, I think the the issue for part of this is that I think people are conflating different things about this disaster response. There are, of course, the Department of Homeland Security is charged with dealing with issues happening at the border, of course, but that doesn't preclude lawmakers from adequately funding FEMA and adequately funding disaster response either. It's not just it's not a zero sum game here. We can manage the situation at the border and we can provide disaster response. It's not an either or scenario here.
Well, I disagree. If that's the case, we should be able to handle it, but you're blaming it on the fact that there's just not enough money. I think there's more than enough money. I think we should be looking into where is the money going to? How is that money being spent? And I don't think it's being utilized, efficiently. That's just my opinion because you said, you said yourself, okay, well, they should be able to handle this. Well, obviously, they are not able to handle it. So again, I guess my point to you, Mr. Schaefer, would be this: how is this money being spent? You just keep saying, well, you just need more money. I want to know how the current money is being spent, and I think we should all know that because at the end of the day, it's the American taxpayer that's going to end up having to flip the bill to pay for additional money for whatever it is.
Hey, Dave. Thank you very much for the call. You want to respond back to that, Dan?
Yeah, it's we should be able to handle both of these things, and
Yes.
it is the Republicans who have cut funding from this, plain and
I don't,
simple.
man, I don't know how you get beyond that, Dan. Right? You can add all these other things that Republicans are adding, but at the root of it is the fact that they continue to choose to underfund what is a program that benefits Democrats and Republicans alike. It's not about, uh, you know, you're supporting people who aren't Republicans. I mean, or you're not supporting people who aren't Democrats, man. It's for all Americans at a time of crisis when they're at their lowest ebb and they need the support that they can get. Yes, our government can handle it. Dan, I don't know how people can say we can't. We're the most powerful nation on earth with the greatest budget on earth.
You're absolutely right.
Even though we only make up 4% of the global population, don't tell me we can't handle it. 855-752-4842. My guest is Dan Schaefer. He is with Recombobulation Area, and I'm happy he's here. You'll be hearing from him time to time on the Earl Ingram Show. We'll be right back.
Thanks, Earl.
and welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. We've been talking, for the entirety of the show about FEMA and about the disaster and the fact that Republicans are looking to blame the Biden administration and the Harris administration for not responding, which is just not true, hasn't been true. And it doesn't matter how many times they want to repeat it, it's not true. Listen to the former President Donald Trump yesterday saying that they haven't been here and I'm here. Well, yeah, you can be there, Donald Trump, but what are you doing? It's easy for you to show up. You're not in charge. And so you can't compare the two. FEMA has been there since the inception. The sheer size of this disaster is what's at stake, and the fact that there's less resources available than really needs to be had. Republicans have chosen not to fund FEMA. And David himself, said that, they're concerned about where the money goes. Floridian Republicans in the Senate weren't on board with the bill either. Rick Scott voted no on the bill, while Marco Rubio wasn't present for the vote on Thursday. This is this past Thursday's vote and bill for adding additional funds to FEMA. In interviews later, that he didn't vote for the bill because it contained a bunch of things, Marco Rubio, unrelated to disaster relief, like additional funding for Ukraine, low-income heating assistance, and relief for Jackson, Mississippi, which is recovering from a historic water crisis. Despite this, however, the two senators sent a letter to the Senate Appropriations Committee last week asking for a robust and timely federal response to the hurricane. Let's go to Mark from Sussex. Good morning to you, Mark. You say what?
Good morning, Earl, and thanks for taking my call. David made two great points, which you guys just glossed right over, because you can't defend the fact that all of the funds that FEMA was getting, a lot of it was going to that illegal border and to the illegal aliens. And now when we do have a disaster, we don't have the funds. And now you want Rick Scott and the Republicans to approve more. Yes, I think we should approve more for the East Coast that got buried, but absolutely no more funds should be going to housing and education and all these other things for these illegal immigrants. And your guest, he glossed right over the fact that, we'll just give it more money. That's not the answer.
Well, I'll tell you, Mark, it is the answer. It needs more money. There are people who are struggling financially. They're American citizens. And politics should be damned. It's not about politics now. And so it's not about one-upmanship or gamesmanship, Mark, that Republicans are attempting to do. The people who are struggling right now, man, need support. So you say they don't give them any money. They don't give them any more money. The money has been squandered based on what you say. So let's say that's the case. So what did the people who are struggling now have to do with that, if that is in fact the truth? And I challenge you on that. But so the citizens who are struggling now, who had nothing to do with any of that, we leave them?
Absolutely not, Earl.
Well, you said no more money.
Again, I said we should give money for the East Coast. But you know what Rick Scott and Republicans want to know? Where did all that money from FEMA go? And before we'll allocate more, okay, why did we do this? That was not a disaster. The border is a disaster because of Kamala Harris, but that is not considered FEMA needed revenue or funds.
Mark, the border is a crisis because of Kamala Harris. That's what you said. How long has the border been a crisis, Mark?
The border's been a crisis for a long time,
So,
but she made it a lot worse.
Oh, okay. Hey, Calvin, you want to respond to him at all? Okay. Mark, thank you very much for the call. I think Brendan will respond to you. Good morning to you, Brendan. You want to respond to Mark at all?
Oh, thanks for tagging me in. Oh my God, my head's ready to explode. These knuckleheads out there buying into all the projection from the Republican Party. You people are all foolish. You need to get educated. It's such a small fraction of what FEMA spends. And hey, all you Republicans out there, you counting all the dollars that all these migrants are putting into our tax funds, and they're not getting anything from it because they can't file for tax returns. Employers have to take taxes out. What about all the American companies out there that hire these people as cheap labor and then pay them under the table? Is anybody going after them? What about Springfield, where the factory boss said, I'm tired of hiring American citizens who are drug addled, can't make it to work. I hire these people, they show up, they work, they finish their quotas for the day before they leave, and they don't give us any problems. You know what I see? I see a lot of entitled Americans sitting around biatching about their problems and trying to blame it on somebody else. And that's all there is to it. The other thing is funny how when Daggett over there, Trump's buddy at the pier, the video came out of him threatening American citizens with this strike. And the next day, and a picture of him and Trump together down at Mar-a-Lago. And what do you know? The next day, the strike is over. They're going to try to settle the contract. Isn't it amazing how things work? And if you all want to ignore the obvious, that's fine. But you're just doing that. You're ignoring the obvious because you need someone to blame for all your problems. These people come in here, they work. They just want a chance to make a living. A lot of them send money home to their families. And you're all willing. If all you had companies, you'd be hiring them as cheaper labor, and then you'd be complaining about them on Earl's show. So give it a rest.
Hey, Brendan, glad you got it off your chest. All right, thank you very much for the call. Let's go to Gene from Eau Claire. Good morning to you, Gene. You say what?
That was outstanding.
Yeah, it
Thank
was.
you, sir. That was great thing I've heard. Good job. As a voter in this next election, it is your responsibility, everybody, to read Project 2025. In addition to this, with all the spewing and all the blaming going on, you need to look at or hear from people actually reading these documents, the 165-page document regarding the pending case against Donald J. Trump, and read about the unnamed co-conspirators, folks, because this is real. You need to wake up. The hurricane issue, I watch live all of our representatives. Those Republicans vote against anything to help people like us. So start watching too, guys, because I've watched for years and I've watched them live. Those people don't give one iota about you. They care about the people that are giving them money so they can stay in power. And your vote counts. Please, please look at these things. Thank you very much. You guys have a great weekend. Great show.
Hey, Gene, thank you very much for the call. Here's the essence of what we're talking about. And the fact that this horrific crisis has occurred, and more coming, because we're just in the beginning of the hurricane season. And FEMA is out of funds, or will be out of funds. To sit back and say they've given all of it to the border and given all of it to immigrants is just not true. And so it doesn't matter how many times Republicans say that. It does not matter how many times they repeat that. That's not going to fix the issue. The issue is they know that hurricanes are coming, and they know that the American people are in the eye of those hurricanes. Let's do this. Let's go to Al from Milwaukee. Good morning to you, Al. Thank you for the call. You say what?
Good morning, Earl. You remember a couple months ago I called you and I was driving and I listened to a station. I listened to your station after you were off the air, And I told you that the people running that show played a tape of George Bush, the father, when he was in office complaining about the problems of the border when he was the president. How many presidents have there been since then? And if there was a problem then, why is it still a problem now? The other part of this is the fact that there's fault that needs to be put on the people who live along the East Coast, knowing that every year we have a hurricane season, and if they live in the path of the hurricane, they know there's going to be damage and whatever, and they should be taking as much blame for trying to live there, knowing that this is going to happen year after year after year. When I was in the military, I was stationed at 2 bases in Tornado Alley between South Dakota and Texas. I used to sit there and watch tornadoes bounce up and down. You see 10 or 12 of them a day. I would never choose to live in that part of the country knowing that this could happen to me, because then I would have to either possibly get killed or possibly lose everything that I've worked for
Right.
all my life. It doesn't make sense. But blaming the politicians, whether they're not at fault. The fault is the fact that we have an agency of our government that can't do the job because you got idiots in office. Understand, when you run for office, your job is to represent the people, not you and not the government. And all these people we have in office, they're not representing the people of the United States. They're representing the dollar bill.
Hey, Al, thank you very much for the call. You know, it's when whether the people should be there or not, there are people in Georgia, North Carolina, who were impacted, South Carolina, who were impacted by this hurricane and the remnants of it. And those people don't live in those alleys. And my bottom line is, right now these people are up against it and they need support and they should be getting it from the government. There's nowhere else to turn. 855 752 4842. If we can help the rest of the world, we surely can help the American citizens. All right, welcome back. What I can't believe is the last few minutes of the Earl Ingram Show for this week. We've carried this conversation on for the bulk of the show, and I think it's really that important because from now through the rest of the month, you're going to be seeing, these views from Republicans, and they're going to be showing these poor people and their struggle and their suffering, and they're going to say, see, Kamala Harris did that. See, Joe Biden is responsible for that. See, that's why you need to vote for Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is going to stand there and say, hey, this would have never happened if I was president. Oh, really? Because he's so quick to say things that won't or wouldn't have happened. So I'm sure he'll say this. He's going to say it before, next week. This wouldn't have happened if I was president of the United States, as if he somehow could summon from the heavens for this to not take place. Let's go to Tom from West Dallas. Good morning to you, Tom. You say what?
Good morning, Earl. I just want to point out that we really need to get a unified voice in the Democratic Party condemning these lies. I mean, back in 2017, which people need to bring up, Governor Cooper of North Carolina received asked for a $900 million request for disaster relief fund, and Trump only gave him $6.1 million. Trump throws paper towels at people. Trump let California burn because he doesn't like those people. So if you're not on board with Trump, you're screwed. Is basically what happens with Trump. And we need, even like with Mandela Barnes, he should have been harping on Johnson's ridiculous things that he was saying out there to let the public know that that guy's an idiot too. We really need to point out these things to the public, debunking all these claims. Down in Florida, they really need whoever the guy's running against, Rick Scott. That needs to become a big advertising blitz.
Yes.
Rick Scott refused to give you your money to save you. All these Republicans who are right now, because we're coming up to an election. This is a perfect advertising blitz for all of these Democrats down in these states that got wiped out, to say these people did not vote in your interest. You are suffering now because of him, not us.
Tom, couldn't have said it better. Rick Scott is in a fight for his life as we speak. Good chance he may lose his race. He's certainly deserving of losing it, but thanks for pointing that out. Let's go to Charles from Milwaukee. Good morning to you, Charles. Thank you for the call. You say what?
Hey, good morning, Earl. Great topic this morning. I also just wanted to bring up a point like the last caller. Not only did he hold up most of the funds in North Carolina, the hurricane that hit Puerto Rico.
Oh, yeah.
In 2018, he didn't release the funds for Puerto Rico until 21, close to the election. So I don't understand these people when they keep trying to say, well, Donald Trump would be great. He'll fix it all. Yeah, he held up funds for 3 years for Puerto Rico.
Which is, United States. Those are United States citizens.
And these things are facts. If people would just open up their eyes and do a little more listening, a little more reading, they'd find out that Republicans hold up funding to a lot of things, even even police departments, when they always try to claim that Democrats are against police. No, it's not that. If they would look up stuff, they would see that Republicans hold up funding for a lot of things that Democrats try to get through.
No problem, Charles. Thank you very much for the call. I'll tell all of you as this weekend approaches and you watch what Republicans are going to be saying, not just the elected officials, those in the media as I was listening to them this morning as I came in on radio talk shows and on televisions, they're all going to speak with the same voice, not the same hymnal. And they're going to blame Kamala Harris, which is what got me on this. You know, Donald Trump Jr., of all people, blaming Kamala Harris. His daddy blaming Kamala Harris. And then we got some people clearly in this listening audience who bought into that, and they were doing the same. But there's a major difference between truth and fiction, and some of us can't figure it out. All right. Thank everybody who made the show go. Thank everybody who made the week go. Can't do it without you. Thank you, Calvin. Up next, Jane Madden and Greg Bott. Madden on air. Enjoy this wonderful weekend. See you guys on Monday.